So we will first, like I said, do a brief introduction, and then we'll dive into sterilization and some product claims, and also some traceability and various standards there. So first, IDFL, we're accredited and members of various associations worldwide. Next slide, please. And we have clients from all over the globe. Next slide, please. You might find yourself on these lists. Next slide. And IDFL basically separates into two parts, or two functions. We have a testing side where we test everything that's a filled textile product. So the fabric on the outside and also the filling on the inside that is being encompassed by the fabric. So we test synthetic fills like polyester and nylon. We do natural fill testing like down and feathers, cotton or wool. We also test the textile, like I mentioned, and also finished product testing. Our next area of services, next slide, please, are you could classify them in audits and certifications, inspections, sterilization permits, which we'll be talking about today, and other consulting services. Next slide, please. We have offices all over the globe. At the bottom left corner, you see our info@idfl.com email address. If you need to contact a particular office, just send us an email. We'll get you in touch. Next slide, please. So without delaying any further, we'll get into the meat of the presentation. I'll turn the time over to Kristen Lieber and Meeg to talk about sterilization label requirements. Over to you, Kristen.
Thanks, James. I'm happy to be with everyone today. I would also like to introduce Meeg Outson, and she is our lead auditor and inspector for North America. She will be your IDFL contact for sterilization services going forward. And we just wanted to get a face out there for you for Meeg. Next slide. Okay, the sterilization explanation. The down and feather industry has a general global requirement that down and feathers, wool, and other natural fills such as hair, shoddy, must be sterilized as part of the washing and drying process. The sterilization process ensures that materials are clean and free from bacteria, viruses, and disease. Next. Before fills can be sold in some U.S. states or in any state online, a sterilization permit is required for the factory that processes the down, wool, or other natural fills. This permit number must be printed on labels of filled bedding products and now on insulated outerwear. So the main point of emphasis is that now the sterilization permit number must be printed on the label of all outerwear, filled outerwear, beginning the 31st of December of this year. Now for brands and manufacturers, you will get the sterilization permit number from your supplier. The supplier will have gone through the process of obtaining that sterilization permit and an inspection. Okay, this slide shows examples of insulated outerwear garment labels and a permit number being added to those labels. So you can see the first black label, the permit number is the middle, the PA-1234, can be added on the same label as the filling. It can be on a new label, separate from everything sewn into the garment. And then the third orange one is just another example of where it can be placed on a garment label. Okay, next slide. I think the big question is why the new sterilization requirement? It is really great because it's a general safeguard for the industry. It provides full disclosure and security. Main thing is it protects the brands. First, by holding the supply chain accountable. Second, tracking the source of the filling is going straight through that permit number. You will know where the supplier is and how to find them. And it verifies clean and sterile product fillings with full transparency. So this ultimately will lead to consumer confidence, and it's just a great thing. Next slide. Okay, to review, we do offer a comprehensive sterilization service package. We start with the factories. We perform on-site inspections. We can perform these anywhere in the world, and check the sterilization process and the operation and make sure it meets all the requirements. Then we process the initial applications for sterilization permits through the states. We'd first go through Utah or Pennsylvania and then apply for the other states that require it. We provide annual notification and renewal of the sterilization permits, and then also track the reinspection of the sterilization processing plants. And this is required every 3 years now. So the contact information is inspections at IDFL, and anyone can send a message to us there and we can get right back to you. Brands, suppliers, anywhere down the chain. And that's all I have for now on the sterilization permit requirement. Next.
The next slide.
Next slide.
Let's back up to the first slide on polyester fill claims. There we go. All right, so looks like there's a little bit of a lag. There we go. All right, so we're going to discuss now the claims made by polyester products, and you see a lot of claims on pillows and jackets, about the polyester filling and what it's supposed to do and how it's supposed to perform, and we're going to discuss all of those claims. So in order to discuss the claims, though, maybe let's do a little review of the polyester testing that we discussed during the last seminar. So we went over carefully some of the testing and the characteristics of polyester and the performance testing. You can find the presentation on the AAFA website if you want to review that. But specifically, we talked about characteristics such as the identification of the fiber, the denier, the thickness of the fibers, the staple length, or the length of those fibers, the crimp frequency, and the type of crimp. And these are all very important for the performance and the resiliency and the lofting of polyester fibers. It's really important to also do cross-section analysis to determine if it's a hollow or round. That will affect performance. And opening ratio, which is often missed. It's one of the most important characteristics of polyester fibers. Next slide, please. So why should we verify claims? Well, truth in advertising laws on a federal basis and on a state and local basis, they require credible proof via testing or some sort of certification to back up any claim that you're making. Your legal departments will tell you that if you make a claim on any product, you need to have something to back it up. Retailers and brand names are increasingly wary of the power of consumers and consumer groups to challenge the claims made on products. So you really need to be careful. And when you're verifying these claims, you give your consumers confidence that the claims are true and that these claims are actually being met. And as you ensure that the products as you make these claims and verify these claims, you really make sure that the vendors, are doing it according to your company specifications. And, if you require these claims or require that the proof of these claims and for them to, make sure that your suppliers are doing the necessary work, they'll realize that, they need to make sure that they're doing everything possible to make sure those claims are true and factual. As you can see, some of the claims on the right side of the slide, most of those are okay if you have testing or results or certifications kind of back them up, except for the last one. You can see better than down. That one may get you in trouble. That one's a little hard to verify. So you want to make sure you're stating things that you can back up. Next slide, please. So we're going to go through several claims now that you often see on polyester products and talk about, a variety of ways that, we can verify those claims. So, one is, maintaining loft or resiliency. That's one of the most common claims on product packaging. You see things like my pillow won't go flat, or my jacket is going to remain lofty, or kind of fluffy. These kinds of claims you'll see all the time on polyester filled products. There are several kinds of claims that you see over on the right-hand side. But how do we verify such claims? Well, we have the following tests that can verify those claims. For example, compression tests. This is where we take a weight and compress the polyester material and then release it, to kind of see how it compresses and how much it recovers after, heavy compression. We do washability tests where we wash the material, making sure that that the loft and the resiliency is still there after a washing or after multiple washings. And we examine matting and clumping before and after washing. Matting and clumping are, major problem for polyester products. For example, if you have a jacket and the filling clumps, then you'll have cold spots. Or if you have a pillow, then there can be, if there's an extreme amount of matting or clumping, it can reduce the loft of the polyester pillow and create like an uneven surface and kind of an uncomfortable experience for the consumer. None of those things are good. And then we also can verify and examine opening ratio. If the opening ratio of the material is not near 100%, then you're not going to be able to maintain the loft or even achieve it before washing. So making sure the opening ratio is where you need it is critical. Fiber power is another measure that correlates how high the loft is. The fiber power test is similar to the fill power test that is used for down and feather fillings. Next slide, please. So, there's a lot of claims in polyester that state, unequivocally that their material is washable, that you can wash it 100% and no problems. But washability is a problem for polyester fillings, mainly because the matting and clumping issue that I just mentioned. Many polyester products begin to fail after multiple washings, some even just after one washing. And so idfl recommends, analyzing a product before and after washing to make sure that the washability statement is true. It's often a reason for return products. In the analysis before and after washing, we look at the shrinkage, we look at the matting and clumping, and for products such as a pillow or a comforter, we'll look at the corner evaluation. The corner evaluation will help us determine the shrinkage of the filling material inside, because as you wash it, and if the material shrinks, the filling material kind of leaves empty spaces in the corners, and the empty corners become larger and larger, and it's very obvious and not very pleasing to the customer. So at idfl, we also recommend after you've done these things, you perform a general appearance after washing evaluation, and we do those here at idfl, and those can also be very helpful to kind of give a consumer evaluation, and are they going to be shocked by the way the product looks now after it's been washed? Next slide, please. So often in pillow products, we see pillow firmness as being a claim. Is this a soft, medium, or firm pillow? Many of you have had this experience in buying pillows. Or is it a pillow for a back or a stomach or maybe even a side sleeper, etc.? So how do we verify this kind of claim? Well, we do a compression recovery test to make sure that the recovery is better on a firm pillow than a soft pillow, for example. We also, the compression, should not compress as deeply on a firm pillow, obviously, versus a soft pillow. And so we have a special pillow firmness test where we take a device with a weight that approximates a human head, and we press down on that for a certain period of time and look at the effect on the pillow's firmness. And, and then we'll take these results and compare the pillows and the results that we have with idfl's database of pillow tests, and see where it matches in terms of this soft, medium, hard, or back, stomach, or side sleeper, etc. Next slide, please. Another claim is, warmth ratings or jacket warmth ratings. So we measure the warmth rating of jackets or other products by the use of a hot plate. We take a section of a jacket or a bedding product and then measure the warmth rating in that hot plate testing apparatus. Fiber power has a good correlation to the insulating rating of materials as well. And the GSM value will also give good information about the comparative value between different products. Next slide, please. So fiber content, it's important to know that your material is exactly what it claims. Here we see a label on the right-hand side, 65% polyester, 31% cotton, 4% elastic, etc. We really need to make sure that the blend is correct and that you're getting what the label requires. So you definitely want to make sure those are verified. Those are the easiest ones to, get in trouble with if they're off. Next slide, please. So fiber characteristics, the characteristics of fibers are not generally a consumer claim, but these values are normally found in your buyer specification in your purchase contracts for your fill material. You need to have, when you purchase polyester filling material, a very robust specification that includes things like staple length, crimp type, denier, your cross-section analysis and blend analysis, et cetera. Those things should be tested before the polyester is shipped to your sewing factories. It's critical that you know what you're getting and you can verify what you're getting, because these attributes ultimately will affect performance testing that we were just talking about, such as matting and clumping, warmth, et cetera. Next slide, please. There are other claims that we see on all kinds of products. The material is antimicrobial, antibacterial, or prevents dust mites, or dust proof, or the material has cooling elements in it, etc. So all those claims, we have special tests that can identify and verify those claims that are being made. Next slide, please. So recycled filling material. So many polyester products, now have claims being made about being recycled. These claims sometimes exceed the amount of actual recycled material available in the market. So you want to make sure that, you label something. If you're labeling something as recycled, you can prove that it is, because people will often sell you material that's virgin material. It's really not recycled. So you want to make sure that you make the right claim, because just as you walk down various big box retailers, almost a good portion of their products will have these recycled claims, but there's probably not that much recycled material generally in the market. And so some of these are faulty. You want to make sure you can back it up. So there's two ways to identify recycled fill. We can do a fiber analysis with some degree of accuracy to tell you whether it's regenerated versus virgin material. But the most common way is through supply chain certifications like GRS or RCS and other recycled standards, that can verify through the chain of custody that your material or your polyester is really recycled. Next slide, please. So we have a lot of claims now that talk about responsible sourcing and material transfer, transparency, and audits and inspections and certifications of polyester can, help you verify such claims. These all have to do with, the how traceable your chain of custody is, and there's various services that idfls and others that can provide to make sure that you can back up these claims that you're making. Next slide, please. So with that, let's move into traceability, and I'll turn the time over to our CEO, Wilfred Lieber.
Thank you, James. It's good to be here talking to you about traceability. We're going to talk about traceability of both natural fills and polyester. The previous sections of the seminar so far have gone over some specific performance issues of polyester material and also the sterilization requirement. Traceability is an interesting topic. This has been part of the tidal wave of change that has occurred in the textile industry as we look at sustainability and transparency. Traceability is one of the chief things that most companies are involved in. What is traceability? It is a process of following your product through the supply chain back to the original manufacturer and or the source of the raw materials. Why should companies trace their material? Tracing your material gives you greater control and visibility of your supply chains, which protects the brand and the retailer. This traceability ensures that products are obtained from ethical and sustainable sources, especially with all the claims on recycled and other claims that are made. Traceability is the only way to verify many of those claims. We have a little bit of delay in that. Let's talk about natural fills. The traceability of natural fills. We have down and feather, we have wool, we have other animal hairs. We're going to talk about tracing for several reasons. Number one, tracing the country of origin. This is really important in today's market, is to understand the country of origin of the materials, especially natural fills. We want to find out that we're dealing with the correct species. There's both testing and traceability to determine that. For dealing with animals, we want to look at farm conditions, the ethical treatment of these animals. And we want to determine the location of raw material processing, which is very important for the sterilization permits that Kirsten talked about. Product origin. As all of you know, COVID-19 has disrupted so many supply chains. So we're getting materials through various countries and through regions that we didn't deal with before. As countries close down, other ones open. So the supply chains have been disrupted generally over the world. There are also certain regions of the world that are politically sensitive, and you know about these, where we have sanctions against certain areas that we cannot purchase cotton or purchase raw materials because of government and or company sanctions against certain regions. Most products claim country of origin on labels. It's required in the United States. Certifications can help the retailers and the brand names prove that whatever your raw materials are in your product, we can prove that origin through the chain of custody documentation. There are two ways of determining country of origin we have. Number one is chain of custody audits back to the source. Through chain of custody documents such as RDS for down, RWS for wool, for mohair, these other standards, will trace that material back to the country of origin. Recycled materials also help tracing if you have a GRS or an RCS certification. There is another method of tracing things that were animal cells or vegetable cells, and that's isotope testing. This is a technology that idfl has been working with for about 20 years that helps us determine the country of origin of many of the natural products. We've done it for cotton, we've done it for down and feathers. So let's talk a little bit about isotope testing. Okay. First, I'm sorry, we're having trouble with this slide a little bit. The transaction certificate is the primary way that we determine custody country of origin. The transaction certificate in the textile exchange or in other systems certify that specific shipments of product contain certified materials and shows where those products were sent from. As you back up this chain of custody through the transaction certificate, you know where things are coming from. And as you understand your entire supply chain through this chain of custody, you can find the weaknesses, the bottlenecks, the opportunities. As you switch supply chains, you need to require that you have transaction certificates that go back to the origin of the country that you're labeling your products. The other way of determining country of origin is isotope testing. All living tissue accumulates certain heavy isotopes from their food and water. Every geographic location has a unique signature of these isotope concentrations. We normally look at hydrogen and oxygen and sulfur, heavy isotopes, to determine via examination of a huge database of locations where that material came from. This kind of isotope test has been used in tracing, in forensic testing, for tracing location of humans where they're not sure where the bodies, for example, are found from. It's used by the wine industry to verify location of grapes. It's used by the vegetable industry in Europe to determine where the most expensive asparagus is coming from. This isotope technology is used for many things. We use it to determine the original location, the growing location of vegetable products, fibers such as cotton, etc., and of animal products, where the animals were raised. It uses a technology called isotope ratio mass spectrometry that can measure the specific proportions of these heavy isotopes. And we're happy to send additional information. So we determine the country of origin by those two things. But once we get back to that country of origin, we may want to know a little bit more about how the animals were raised if we're dealing with the fibers, such as down and feather or wool or mohair. Were these animals raised free range? What kind of water and food supplies do they have? Are they adhering to local animal and welfare laws? Are they adhering to the best industry practices? So once you determine that the animals come from Poland, the chain of custody documentations and the transaction certificates allow you to actually determine where the animals were grown and making sure that animal welfare laws are being followed. If you look carefully at the standards for responsible down, for down pass, for IDS, the other down and feather standards, or for RWS, for the textile exchange wool standard, they all have very specific requirements for best practices for animal husbandry. The treatment of the animals after they've been raised is also a big part of the awareness that we have now for the ethical treatment of these animals. Traceability can ensure that the suppliers do not participate in any problem, such as improper transportation, illegal or unwanted procedures on the animal, and force feeding or live plucking. So, doing the traceability certifications allow you to make sure that none of these practices are happening in your supply chain. The other thing that the country of origin allows you to do, and getting back to the farm, is to determine if a product is really duck or goose. We can do some testing on the product, but the chain of custody documentation allows you to determine this really came from a duck farm and you have a duck feather. This really came from a goose farm and you have a goose feather. Or it really came from an eiderdown duck in Iceland, which is the most expensive down and feather material. It runs about $2,000 US dollars per kilo. The next part of traceability is to help determine where the filling material was processed. It's important to know where the down and feathers, where the wool, the other material was actually processed. And this is important to know for two reasons. Number one, are those sites that are handling the material following best practices for social compliance, for handling of the factories, for cleanliness, etc. In the US, this location of the factory is very critical for the sterilization permit number. Chain of custody documentation through RDS, for example, comes right to the processing factory that washes and cleans your down and feathers. You need to know that where that factory is to make sure that that factory number, permit number, appears on your bedding material or your outerwear jacket. Every factory in the world has its own unique sterilization permit number. And sterilization of these feathers is required by almost all markets. It's written into European law. The Chinese require it, and the US requires it, and requires a sterilization permit number. idfl verifies the cleaning and sterilization of these factories through our on-site inspection and audit practices, and we also do oxygen turbidity testing on the material when we verify the sterilization process. One thing to note on these factories and the sterilization process, this is a great safeguard, as Kristen mentioned, in case of questions about the cleanliness. When we had an outbreak of avian flu many years ago, it was the sterilization permit number that existed on all the bedding products in the United States, which prevented the government from shutting down the down and feather supply chain, because they were convinced via the documentation on the sterilization permit numbers that the material was indeed clean and sterilized and free from any possibility of disease or virus. Now we're going to talk a little bit about tracing your synthetic fields. We think, well, synthetic fields might be simpler, but there are problems in the supply chain of synthetic fields. Almost all plastic can be reused at some time, but some plastic is not suitable for polyester. And how are these companies utilizing their recycled material? Are manufacturers properly disposing of unused materials in a social, responsible way and in a sustainable way? We also make sure that the proper protocol is being adhered to when manufacturers are recycling polyester, the mass balance issue. Mass balance. This is the way that we determine that the companies are not cheating or going around the supply chain of custody. By looking at the volume of certified products that a particular manufacturer has, controlling that as they document it, making sure that an equal volume or less, because there is a loss in volume of material during production, that an equal or less volume of material leaves the organization. If you have a case where 1,000 kilograms of material comes into a factory and 3,000 kilograms is going out, then you have missing material. You have some non-certified material. You have cheating going on. And when we evaluate the transaction certificates, as we monitor chain of custody transactions between different facilities, then we catch these problems that do occur. The best practice to maintain a system that clearly shows the inputs, the processing losses, and the outputs for each certified product on a batch level. So we verify this both for polyester and for synthetic fields. 70% of consumers want to know that the brands that they are supporting, that they are purchasing products from, are doing enough to address social and environmental issues. It's just a part of business, part of this tidal wave of change that's occurred. certifications let those customers know that the companies, the brand names, the retailers are taking the social environmental issues seriously. And the certification also provides a peace of mind and reduced risk of material related to activist campaigns. We know that the activist campaigns go against everyone for every kind of product in the world, and having a good, solid certification program in your company has forestalled the activist effort to shut down production of certain products in your companies. So why would we choose idfl for handling these certifications, these traceability audits? We believe strongly that we provide a very cost-efficient and fast certification process. We've been doing this on these natural and synthetic supply chains for over 10 years. We have a lot of locations. And because we focus on building materials in our certification, we really understand these industries. We really understand the down and feather, the wool, and the polyester industry. And we provide then a one-stop shop for testing and certifications. We are happy to provide any additional information through our website or through our email addresses in our various locations for those that want additional information. These are a list of some of our locations where you can find additional information. We are very happy to have participated in this webinar. We appreciate AAFA in allowing us to host this seminar on polyester and traceability and sterilization. I think we'll leave it open now for any questions.
Great. Thank you all. Thank you to all of our speakers today, Will, James, and Kristen. We will go ahead and take some time now for questions. So as a reminder, if you have any questions you'd like to ask, please feel free to drop those in the question box in your GoToWebinar control panel, and we'll try to get to as many questions as we have time for just now. Any unanswered questions, we'll make sure to follow up after the program today. So the first question we have is for clarification on Canada's sterilization labeling laws. Would one of you perhaps be able to just confirm the history of the three provinces that had regulations and where regulations still exist that require those labeling requirements?
Hi, yeah, the three provinces did require some sterilization regulation, and they have now faded out, and only one province requires it now. And I need to be reminded of which one that is, out of Ontario and Manitoba and Quebec. But only one requires it now, but it is different from the US sterilization regulation.
Great, thank you. In terms of specific testing, do you recommend conducting a microbial test after sterilization has been done? Is there a verification process that companies should be doing to confirm that the sterilization was complete and compliant?
During the sterilization inspection, we pull samples, and as Wilf mentioned, we test for oxygen and turbidity for the cleanliness levels, and those are verified, and that's the accepted testing for the sterilization application. So if clients want to again test for the cleanliness or for other areas, they could do that. Wilf, do you have anything else to say on that?
Sure. It's always important to test in the final stage of production the down and feather or the wool to make sure they are still sterilized, because the transportation after the initial material is processed can lead to contamination of the material. We've seen warehouses in Southeast Asia where they hold bales of raw material that's been washed and sterilized out of doors for 6 months. They get wet, they get rain, animals are running about. So you have to make sure that your product is clean. That goes for synthetics too. It's possible that you have synthetics lying in unclean environments. So you should have your material really verified and checked for cleanliness and safety before it's inserted into a jacket or a bedding product.
Great, thank you all. That leads well into our next question about sterilization for polyfilling. Would a company do testing on sterilization of synthetic materials, and are there sterilization certificates required for synthetic or polyfilling?
The sterilization requirements in the U.S. are just for natural fill, animal hair or products. However, if there might be wool mixed with polyester or polyfill or down and feather mixed, that portion would need to have the sterilization requirement met.
And if there were any other concern about a shipment of polyester, that it had its slight odor or it looked odd, they can also request that the similar kind of test be completed, oxygen turbidity, make sure there's no dust or organic material on those surfaces. It's very rare, so people don't regularly test. But if there's a question or concern or the material looks odd, then go ahead and test those hygienic tests such as oxygen turbidity.
Great, thank you. So more in terms of best practices of material treatments, is there a way that you can recommend to avoid clumping of materials? Is there specific to synthetic fibers a practice to avoid that material clumping in the product?
There are a lot of things that you can do. It's a whole host of factors. If you have very tiny denier fibers, polyester fibers, that can create a problem. If you have long fibers mixed with short fibers, you can create a looping which ends into a matting and clumping. It also depends if you have ball fibers versus loose fiber fill. There's a whole issues, and we probably should provide. We can maybe put a little cheat sheet in on things that you can look for in the various types of fillings. There's not a simple answer to that question, but it's something we should provide a worksheet that we could distribute for those that attended the seminar. I think we can grab your email address and send you a sheet of information about that.
Great, thank you. So back on the registration and permit numbers question, can you clarify or speak more to the format of registration numbers? What exactly is being certified? A sterilizer is focusing primarily on that filling material, certifying the sterilization of that filling material. And I think we touched on this briefly in previous questions, but there are steps in between that material being sterilized and ending up in the final product. So is there an additional certification for the sterilization of material in a final product, or can you just sort of walk back through what the permit refers to in terms of components of a finished product?
Okay. The sterilization permit comes from the processing factory. If you can remember back to the picture on the slide, the factory who actually washes and cleans the down and feather mix or the virgin wool, they are certified to receive the sterilization permit. So that number is then given to the brands to use on the finished product label. So their fill is certified supposedly by that sterilization permit number. Now, many people test the finished products. They'll send those in, and also test the inside, the filling for oxygen, turbidity, cleanliness, many tests just to, again, prove or find that that material really does meet that requirement.
A little follow-up on that. We have a lot of clients who ask us to do a certification or some kind of label from idfl that this product meets hygienic standards, and we're happy to do that. We can test finished products and provide that certification, but it's not a replacement for the sterilization number that comes from the factory doing the material. We also have a Healthy Down program, which goes into a lot of the other things that are involved with down, the avian allergens that are very rare reaction with humans, but we make sure that those are clean, and we can offer a Healthy Down certification for people that want an extra level of security on the cleanliness and hygienic nature and anti-allergen attributes of their down and feathers.
Thank you. More along the lines of synthetic filling specifically, does a product that has entirely synthetic filling need to disclose the contents and that they are in fact synthetic so that a company isn't worried about questions of compliance with natural and animal-based fiber sterilization regulations?
Yes, this is a great question. In the United States, all filled products, anytime you have a layer of fabric with some kind of filling and another layer of fabric, those require a registration with state governments in the United States. Those are regulated. The filling must be disclosed. So you don't have the option of not disclosing it. You have to disclose what kind of filling it is. It's polyester, it's cellulose, whatever it might be. So this allows you to clear up. We don't have animal fills. We don't have vegetable fills such as cotton in this material. It's all a synthetic or polyester fill. So that's required on any product. And it's not only bedding products, it's pet products, it's car seats, anything that has a filling between two layers of fabrics must be labeled properly according to the U.S. labeling requirements for filled textiles.
Thank you. Building on that, is recycled polyester and recycled synthetic filling materials. Can you speak to how a company might determine that the polyester fiber filling is recycled, or what process a company might use in using recycled filling materials?
I've got a couple of questions in there. I'm going to divide it into, number one, the labeling, how that might be labeled on their law tag labels and in their advertising, and determining it. In the section on traceability, we discussed that you can determine recycled material via examination of the polyester fibers. There's a little check that we do to give a good estimation as to the number of fibers that have been regenerated from recycled sources, because those are slight indicators in the signature of the polyester when we look under a very high-powered microscope. We also, the best way to determine that is, if you don't do that testing, is a chain of custody certification, such as GRS, the Global Recycled Standard, or RCS, the Recycled Claim Standard. These will verify that your polyester material is actually coming from recycled sources. Now, how do you label that? We recently had a meeting of the International Association of Bedding and Furnishing Law Officials, and we determined for the United States, right now on the legal law label, which on bedding products is a very specific formatted label for bedding products. There's only two options right now. You can say the material is new, and you can say the material is used. Recycled polyester and recycled reprocessed down and feathers are not used material. A used product is, let's say, a mattress that's simply been disinfected and then resold. Or a jacket, for some reason, if someone resells a jacket, that's a used product. When you reprocess recycled materials, you create a brand new fiber, a brand new version of the down and feathers, a brand new polyester fiber that's extruded in the same process that a virgin fiber would be extruded. So those materials on the legal law label are labeled new. This jacket or this pillow contains all new 100% polyester fiber or down and feathers or whatever it is. On the advertising claims or the packaging claims, that's where you label it recycled. The material in here, which is really as good as new, is listed as new material, comes from recycled feedstock or recycled sources. In the case of feather down, it's the feathers that have been extracted from jackets and rewashed, reprocessed, re-sterilized, everything done as if it were new. Polyester, it's the same way. It comes from polyester fibers or PET bottles or some other plastic sources where it's melted down, reformulated, re-extruded into polyester fibers. So for labeling in the US, recycled materials, truly recycled materials are listed as new materials on the legal law label. But on the description of the jacket, the extra labeling, the packaging, and the advertising, you can make that claim that it does come from recycled sources.
So while we're on the topic of claims and standards, can you speak to, I believe this was early in the presentation, does IDFL rely entirely on ASTM standard testing, or does IDFL have some of your own test methods and related standards that you rely on?
Wherever we can, for example, on the polyester testing that we described, we have ASTM or ISO standards that can be used in meeting a lot of the claims. IDFL has their own series of testing methods specific to field textiles, such as the pillow firmness test, the corner evaluation tests, the test for leak proof of polyester filled products. This is an issue that a lot of companies are facing, is their polyester or down and feather products are leaking filling material. We have issues with microfiber shedding as these polyester fibers leak from products. Many of those downproof, leak-proof fiber, leak-proof tests are IDFL internal tests. So it's a combination of whatever. When we find a testing standard in ASTM or AATCC or in ISO, we will take those tests, or in even the Japanese or European testing systems. If not, we create our own and offer those to clients.
Great, thank you. It looks like we probably have time for just one more question here. So we'll look at, there's a question that's come in about isotope testing. Does IDFL conduct that type of isotope testing on, and can you test that on natural materials like cotton?
Yes, we can do isotope testing on cotton. We just did a series of cotton. People are concerned about cotton coming from the Xinjiang region of China. We can verify where the cotton is coming from and with pretty good accuracy. And we've done a lot of testing for 20 years on down and feather locations. We think this is a technology that will be increasingly used to make sure that material is not coming from certain restricted regions and to make sure that country of origin is labeled correctly.
So actually, we do have one last quick question. If we could just wrap up by confirming the U.S. states that do require sterilization permit numbers on the label, just so that companies have a high-level focus of what states are we looking at for these regulations.
Okay. Well, the regulation is put in place by Utah, but since products are sold online almost always, every state will require the product labels, unless the products are not sold online. The Utah requirement uses the factory sterilization permit number, and it's just one number. Although 5-6 states require sterilization permit registrations and they, provide permit numbers, it's the one initial permit number, either issued by Utah or Pennsylvania, that needs to appear on the product label. Does that answer the question?
I believe so. And just then confirming for apparel and footwear specifically, because a lot of these states, of course, are focused on a larger swath of products, right? Bedding and other products. Really, it's just Utah that is the focus for quilted clothing that is named specifically. Of course, like you said, all states will require it as a result of e-commerce selling into Utah, but Utah is the jurisdictional body that has the one regulation that does overlap with apparel.
That's correct right now, yes.
Great. Well, thank you so much. It looks like we are out of time for questions today. So thank you again to Wilf, James, and Kristen for your presentation today. And on behalf of the AFA, we'd like to join everyone on the call today for joining. And thank you again to IDFL for sponsoring today's program.